Welcome everyone to this simultaneous meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet and Mid-Suffolk District Council Cabinet. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Welcome everyone. Please remember to use the chat function only to indicate that you wish to speak and not to post comments or questions. Please note that messages in the chat panel can be viewed by people watching the live broadcast. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. And may I hand over to Claire for the introductions of non-cabinet members.
Thank you, Chair. So in addition to cabinet members, we have with us today Councillor Alastair McCraw, Councillor Andrew Mellon, Councillor Andrew Stringer, Councillor Daniel Pratt, Councillor Lavinia Haddingham, Councillor Penny Otten, Councillor Richard Mayer, Councillor Robert Lindsay, and Councillor Sarah Mansell. Also, Councillor James Caston. And in addition to that, we also have our Chief Executive, Arthur Shavonia, and our Monitoring Officer, Emily Yule, along with officers who will be presenting. Thank you.
You missed me out, I think.
Sorry, Councillor John Field as well.
And I think you missed me out, Keith Wellham.
Apologies.
Thank you, Claire. Right, okay, moving on to item 1, apologies for absence. I believe we have Councillor Holt has presented his apologies.
I will do a roll call, thanks. Thank you,
okay.
Chair.
Thank you.
So for Babergh councillors, Councillor Clive Arthey.
Present.
Councillor Dave Busby.
Here.
Councillor Derek Davis.
Here.
Councillor Michael Holt. Sorry, apologies from Councillor Holt. Councillor Elizabeth Malvisi. Councillor Malvisi, you're on mute, I believe.
Present.
Councillor Jan Osborne.
Present.
Councillor Lee Parker.
Present.
Councillor John Ward.
Present.
Mid-Suffolk councillors, Councillor Gerard Brewster.
Present.
Councillor David Byrne.
Present.
Councillor Julie Flatman.
Present.
Councillor Jessica Fleming.
Present.
Councillor Peter Gould.
Present.
Councillor Susie Morley.
Present.
Councillor Harry Richardson.
Present.
Councillor John Whitehead.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any to declare? No. Item 3, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I guess all the questions we do have will be related to the main item on the agenda, which now leads me to move to that item, which is item 4 on the agenda. That's paper BCA 1957 and MCA 1966, the Environment and Climate Change Task Force proposal to Cabinet. First of all, I'd like to invite the Babergh Cabinet Member for Environment to introduce the report. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Chair. As councillors, we join politics for many different reasons. Ultimately, it is to improve life for our communities and neighbourhoods. Climate change has been on our agenda for some time now, but it's this last year where it has become a real priority for everyone, not just in our district or county, but in our country as well as the world. But this is not the only international emergency in which we found ourselves playing a key part. The coronavirus pandemic has impacted on us all, and it's expected that as a result, the global emissions will fall between 5 and 10%, with the UK having a potential to be greater than that. Granted, for the most part, we had a period of excellent dry weather, climate change perchance, the skies were clearer, the rivers cleaner, there were more birds, and our grass verges tried hard to emulate a meadow. The Council's response to the pandemic has been incredible, as has the change in our behaviour, demonstrating that if there is the will, there is also the way. But it's due to the overall COVID-19 response that our plans for climate change have not been presented sooner. Luckily, we were able to meet 4 times to gather the information needed on which to base our final proposals. However, I'm sure you will join me and the task force team in thanking the officers for their hard work and commitment during a period of unprecedented pressure. I personally am very grateful for all their efforts, singly and jointly. As with any emergency, you must act without delay, yet remain level-headed. This is why we have continued to keep a range of initiatives as part of our business as usual operations, while basing our next steps on considered expert analysis and advice to ensure we have maximum effect for our communities. Our proposals build on work that's already taken place or is currently taking place. We already play a key role in several environmental partnerships and initiatives, including Tree for Life, Suffolk Climate Change, and the Suffolk Waste Partnerships. And we also offer paperless billing to all our residents. I was very keen that as soon as the opportunity arose, we were able to get this important work back on track. Our councillors are united in our desire to tackle the issue of climate change. Now, following a lot of hard work, cross-party collaboration, and with the benefit of expert advice, we're ready to put forward our proposals about how we can deliver real change to achieve our aspiration of becoming carbon neutral by 2030. But before I move on, I'd like to say another thank you. Thank you to all of the task force for embracing digital processes in the latter part of our work, which has enabled this paper to be presented to you today. Working in partnership will be the key to our success. There are many elements to the plan before you today, which is imperative. We want to work with our leisure providers to move to green energy tariffs, because at the moment they generate 1/3 of our emissions. Also, we need to work with Serco to ensure our waste fleet significantly reduces its emissions both now and in the future, since they generate in the region of 25% of our emissions. Even in just these 2 examples, we have the opportunity to work with the other local authorities in Suffolk to see how we can tackle this together, because at the end of the day, climate change affects us all. The first carbon reduction management plan is the first of many that will help us to reduce both councils' current emissions of approximately 5,452 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is CO2e, per year to net zero, while also ensuring we invest in the right solutions. Remember, net zero came into law 12 months ago, and as a nation we are committed to net zero emissions by 2050. We'll continue to work with partners across the county, the region, including our town and parish council, towards the Suffolk-wide ambition to be carbon neutral by 2020. However, we know we can't do this alone. Our residents and businesses all need to be taking small steps to becoming more environmentally conscious, such as only buying what you need, wasting less, and cycling and walking more. Over coming months, we'll be exploring even more possibilities with a task force subgroup looking at how we can strengthen our biodiversity. I said at the start of my introduction that I became a councillor to make a positive change. I truly believe that by working together the way we have so far, we can ensure Babergh and Mid-Suffolk continue to be places we're proud to call home for generations to come, and that we continue to make our positive contribution to making Suffolk a greener county. It therefore gives me pleasure to propose to the Babergh Cabinet that you adopt the plan before you at 3.1 and 3.3. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malvisi. May I have a seconder from the Babergh Cabinet, please? I'm happy to second that myself. If there are no others, I will second that myself. Thank you. Councillor Morley.
And I will now invite the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet Member for Environment to introduce the report. Councillor Fleming.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Morley, and thank you everyone who is in the room today. It is my pleasure to bring these proposals to the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet for consideration and approval. They are the result of a lot of hard work by the task force group members and the officers who have supported us. I would like to mention a special thank you to our officer Cass Clements, who has been through this journey with us all the way and has managed the numerous and sometimes conflicting comments and suggestions from our meetings. She has introduced helpful guest speakers to us, and after several iterations has produced a set of proposals which capture the best ideas that came from the group. We are now ready to accept these ideas and take them forward into meaningful actions. I will not repeat the messages from our paper about the two commitments by both districts to respond to the climate emergency, because they're in our papers, except to say that every member of the task force has contributed constructively to the proposals in front of us. We don't all necessarily agree on everything, but I think we all do agree that the health of the natural environment, which includes climate change and biodiversity, is one of the most important, probably the most important concern of our time. Recognizing this, there is a widely felt sense that priorities of all areas of decision-making at all levels of government need to change substantially. The work that this group has started is the beginning here in Suffolk. As we consider the various proposals for our first carbon reduction management plan, i.e. Appendix A, I would like to emphasize that the proposals reflect 5 meetings, actually 4.5, as one was focused on biodiversity, so Councillor Malvisi is correct there, as well as comments from Cabinet members and senior officers and a technical report from Groundworks, which we commissioned. They are in effect a set of actions that we believe are ready to set in motion now, pending additional investigation and costing. Several of the proposals will require cooperation with our county and district colleagues, which are all following similar paths, and our joint working with them will add value and purchase to what we wish to receive. Both Councillor Malvisi and I sit on the county-wide Climate Change Committee, and I'm aware that our relevant officers also liaise regularly with each other across the county and districts and with other local authorities in England. The County Council Policy Development Panel is bringing its recommendations to the County Cabinet later this month, and it is remarkable but reassuring to learn that their proposals are very similar and complementary to ours. For example, in areas such as low-carbon energy purchasing, building construction, transport, waste and procurement, we are all talking from the same hymn sheet, and we will benefit from working together to achieve as much benefit as possible. There are also areas where we can work constructively when it comes to biodiversity and land management, getting the balance right for things like roadside verges and working with community organisations and parish councils. And I'm excited at the prospect of what we can all achieve. Addressing the enormous scale of climate and environmental problems is daunting. As with most things that matter, each small step in the right direction is important, and collectively they matter a lot. We've had a glimpse during the pandemic of how rapidly nature can respond when given space. But it should not take that to show us what the potential is when we change the way we do things. I do hope that these proposals are acceptable to you and the respective cabinets, and that we can now move on to the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Can I have a seconder from Mid Suffolk? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Ward.
Madam Chairman, yes, I'm pleased to second the recommendations set out in the report in section 3. I suspect some Mid-Suffolk opposition members may have concerns when they see me as part of the sign-off process on proposals, but let me reassure them that I do care for our planet and its environment, and I do understand that we all have serious responsibilities and obligations when it comes to the human activities driving global warming. It's clear to me that the Cabinet Carbon Reduction Plan will not come cheap. In my introductory speech to the 1920 budget at Mid-Suffolk Full Council back in February, I said, "It is crystal clear to me that if we are to take real action on climate change, then real money will need to be set aside. This £500,000 is just a start for 2021. Now, I did say those words pre-COVID, but I still believe them to be valid. I see it as being both a privilege and responsibility to be one of the two named individual Cabinet members given this delegated authority by Cabinet. I very much look forward to working with a Cabinet member for the Environment and the Section 151 officer as each proposal comes forward for funding. I suspect several proposals will affect both districts, and therefore I will look forward to also hearing those debated by Babergh's Cabinet or Council as part of the overall process. So to reiterate, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to second this report and its recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Before we move on to questions, Cassandra Clements is going to be giving a short presentation to members. So if I can hand over to you, Cass, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you everybody for coming to this simultaneous Cabinet this afternoon on this clearly very important topic. As my portfolio holders have already said, there has been a lot of work go on from the task force and from my team, who, if I could indulge slightly and thank them as well, who are on the call with us today. So I am going to attempt to share my screen with you and just go through a few slides that talks us through how we got to this report today. Okay, can everybody see that? Hopefully that's showing. Lovely, thank you. Okay, so as Jessica and Elizabeth have already said, the Climate Change Task Force was convened in response to the climate change motions that the Council's passed in July 2019. And the role of the task force there was to make recommendations on how the two councils can protect and improve the environment, looking at what opportunities were available and technology that is coming through and opportunities to work with partners. It was also to consider how best to embed those considerations for both climate change and biodiversity ambitions in all decision making going forward, alongside the wider social and economic factors. And finally, to recommend an approach to how we look at delivering net zero carbon emissions for both councils by 2030. The task force looked at a number of topics, including low carbon energy, biodiversity, planning, housing, waste, and transport and travel. And a final meeting culminated in a discussion across all of those topics on all of the possible opportunities that Babergh and Mid Suffolk councils had to take forward. A number of experts were called in to talk to us, and the task force had the opportunity to not only listen but to question those experts to be able to bring the proposals forward today. They included Greater South East Energy Hub, Suffolk Wildlife Trust, Dennis Eagle, Groundwork Suffolk's, and a number of my assistant director colleagues and corporate managers. So the report talks about the data. However, I just wanted to touch on this briefly in my slides, in that our baseline data came from 2018-19 and is 5,452 you'll see a breakdown of the two highest impactors being leisure centres and waste collection. And I'll talk shortly in a second about what we can do about those. And the small table on the right there just shows you the split between the three different scopes that we've considered. A number of councils haven't considered Scope 3 in their presentations, but this was a key factor that the task force were keen that both councils ensured all three scopes were included in our proposals. So the two main areas of impact, as you've just seen, are the leisure centres and also the waste fleet. What you'll see from the proposals before you today is there are a number of interim solutions as well as some longer term aspirations. The two interim solutions here, particularly for leisure centres, is around moving to green energy tariffs. We're currently on blue energy tariffs. There's a lot of work that needs to go on around that. The task force members will be very clear that this is still a tricky area. You have to make sure that the source of that energy is correct and that how that energy is procured is correct. However, that would decrease our emissions fairly significantly, almost immediately, by changing those tariffs. The long-term opportunity around that is around our own energy generation. The second there is around our waste fleet, and the interim measure here is suggested to move to a biofuel, HVO, and that will work on all of our current Euro 6 engine vehicles. So you can move straight from diesel to biofuel without any changes to the vehicles. The long-term solution, of course, is going to be a different solution, potentially electric, potentially hydro. However, that is a technology that is still emerging at the moment, and that's why you'll see that there isn't a definitive proposal around exactly what we will do going forward. However, absolutely our aspiration is to move away from diesel vehicles completely. So you'll see the report proposals follow a similar pattern to the topics that the task force looked at. However, there were clearly many more opportunities available to us. And so the list in front of you, you'll see some additional categories around our council and commercial estate, customer transformation, business, communities, culture change and governance. And so the proposals before you today cover all of those themes. The report talks about next steps, and that will include going through our programme boards to ensure that we have business cases for each individual project that comes forward, that we thoroughly understand the viability of the projects, the costs and the impacts, and they in turn will form part of our formal performance process. At that point, I'll hand back over to you, Chair, for questions.
Thank you, Cass. Right, we'll now move on to the question stage. Firstly, questions from Babergh members. I do want to keep the focus on questions purely on items of clarification on the report in front of us, and that any other discussions we will hold over for the debate later on. So Babergh members, do you have any questions? Firstly, Councillor Arfi.
Sorry, Chairman, I didn't know you were going to go through on a roll.
Yeah, I'm going to go through. Sorry, I'm going to go through one at a time, just to make sure we've got everyone covered. So
no, I don't have any questions. I was a member of the task force, as you know, and I think we've done quite well to pull everything together, as the two portfolio holders have said. So no, I don't have any questions at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Do you have any questions at this stage?
It's just a small one. The used vegetable oil that we're proposing to use in the waste fleet, where are we proposing to get this oil from?
Would you like me to take that, Chair?
Yeah, Cass, yes. Could you answer that, please?
Sure. So we're currently developing a business case on where the oil will come from. There are a number of different options for this. However, we have to be very careful about the actual origin. The best case scenario is being able to as you mentioned, use used vegetable oil. There are some local companies actually that do that. So through the business case, we'll be developing exactly who the originator of that oil will be. But at the moment, that's not yet decided, and that will be something that comes back to Cabinet for decision.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right. Councillor Davis.
No, I'm all good. Thank you very much.
Councillor Malvisi.
No, I'm okay, thank you. I was
Councillor
on the task
Osborne.
force.
So yeah. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like some clarification. First of all, if I can just say, I think this is a really, really big step forward, and well done to all those that have been involved in getting to the stage that we've got to. Clarification on page 15, 9.3 and 9.4. 9.3 says that approval for any funding will come from the Transformation Fund and the General Fund. And the recommendation makes this clear as well, that the Cabinet Member for the Environment will have delegated powers to make that decision. I'm a little bit concerned because there will be some hard decisions to make.
Jan?
No, if I can just finish, Liz, and then it might become clearer. Can I just confirm, because there may be some hard decisions to make when it comes to expenditure in the HRA with a delicate balancing act between delivering homes and spending on the environment. I would like to see in that recommendation, or made clearer, that the Cabinet Member for Finance at Babergh and the Cabinet Member for Housing will be involved in that delegated decision when it comes to giving permission to spend that finance on any actions that will come forward.
Okay, can I answer?
Yes, Councillor Malvisi, yes, please.
Okay, if you read on the recommendations 3.3, and it only applies to us in Babergh, that the Cabinet Member for Environment be given delegated authority to consider the business case for each proposal and to present options to either the Cabinet to agree funding from the Transformation Innovation Fund or to the Council to agree funding from the General Fund. So there is no delegated decision making other than establishing the business case and presenting. So the decision is made by Cabinet and full Council.
I'm just reading the recommendation now, if I may.
Okay.
And it's 3.3 of the recommendations, that the Cabinet Member for the Environment be given delegated authority to consider the business case for each proposal and to present options to either the Cabinet to agree funding from the Transformation Fund and Innovation Fund or the General Fund. It doesn't make any mention to who's going to be given delegated power on the expenditure of the business case for the HRA.
I take your point.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Okay.
See where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
Right.
So that should say that.
I think the Cabinet Member for Finance and the Cabinet Member for Housing at Babergh needs to be involved in that decision making on the business case proposals.
Right. We would need. We'll come back to that later, Councillor Osborne. You're quite right. It does need to reference the HRA. We'll come back to that in a minute. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Councillor Parker.
No questions, Chair, at the moment.
Right, and I don't either. So I now ask for questions from any other members of the Babergh Council present at this meeting. Note that for other members, non-cabinet members, in terms of the questions, a number of the questions I'm sure will be focused on the contents of the report and for clarification, and for those we will provide answers immediately, but I would like to be able to park any more detailed questions on other issues for the cabinet debate, depending on the nature of the question, because it's clear, I think, that some questions that non-cabinet members may wish to ask would benefit from a wider debate rather than a quick answer at this stage. So are there any members of the Babergh Council? I have Councillor McCraw has indicated he wishes to ask a question. And then I've got Councillor Lindsay. So Councillor McCraw, first of all.
apologise, Chair, for that delay there. It's a point of clarification on the recommendation as referred to by Councillor Osborne. I think it's important just to stress this point. Rather than delegated decisions being made, my understanding of this paper and the general thrust of it is that the final decisions under 3.3, and I may stress the final decisions, will either be made by Cabinet or by Council, whether they are General Fund or HRA. And I think it's good and important to clarify that this is not going to be a delegated decision. The fundamental final authority comes down to one of two, Cabinet or Council.
Thank you, Councillor.
Get that clarified, and perhaps we can maybe get that clarified a little by adjusting the amendment to reflect that, particularly on the HRA.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that when we get to the actual Cabinet debate itself, but clearly we need to do that. And yes, it will very much be either Cabinet or Council to make that final decision on the financing. Councillor Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. A big part of our carbon emissions will be indirect through, for example, through our investments that we're making through the pension fund and through in our Treasury function through Schroders, which is invested in the stock market. I did suggest as one of my proposals during the process was that we write to Suffolk Pension Fund Committee and ask them to cut their exposure to fossil fuel companies. That wasn't accepted, even though actually, I mean, I sit on the Suffolk Pension Committee and they have actually already moved some funds into low carbon funds. So I'm just wondering, Schroders, I understand we have 9% of the assets in Schroders are in fossil fuel companies. So I'm just wondering why that was ruled out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lindsay. Obviously, you'll note from our Treasury management strategy that SIPFA does require councils to invest prudently and with a high regard for security and liquidity. And we ourselves in that Treasury management strategy have said that we will invest for security, followed by liquidity, and followed by yield in those orders. And those and that defines our investment strategy, and we will continue to follow that. But and so that'll determine exactly where we invest our funds and the types of organisations we invest in. But in terms of fossil fuel, and I know you and I probably, well, you probably know my views on this because I think we've discussed it many times in the past. The fossil fuel companies, the so-called fossil fuel companies, are rapidly becoming energy companies. They alone have the resources, the financial and other resources, to move to a zero carbon future. I don't think it makes any sense at all to try to penalise them when we should be encouraging them to be part of that process. So just having an ideological dislike of a company because it's a fossil fuel company, I don't think will have a beneficial effect in the long term. In terms of the pension fund, Councillor Whitehead, you're also a member of that, aren't you? I believe you have some views on that. Would you like to comment at this stage?
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
The reality is that the Suffolk Pension Fund, which is a defined benefit fund, there is a responsibility, a fiscal responsibility on the investment of over £3 billion of pension fund money to protect and target approximate risk-adjusted investment returns. And of course, any shortfall would fall back on the employers and ultimately then on our council taxpayers. So it's an important and fiduciary duty we have there. But the committee are actively discussing this, as Councillor Lindsay will know, and that some of the previous passive investments have been switched to climate aware fund, and we're looking very closely at all the environmental, social and governance practices of all the companies that we invest in.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I note that Councillor Austin has her hand up. If I can hold off until we get to the Mid-Suffolk section, please, Councillor Austin. But in the meantime, are there any other questions from other members of the Babergh Council? I don't see any other hands up at this stage. Oh, Councillor Malvisi.
It's just to point out that the so-called fossil fuel companies are the very companies that are doing the major research in alternative energy streams. So it's a dichotomy. I agree, but I think that we need to steer a middle road and a straight road, because these guys are investing a lot of money, and it needs that investment to be able to drive the replacement and alternative fuels.
Mm-hmm. And Shell have recently signed an agreement with a startup that's got hydrogen distribution facilities, and are working closely with them to provide a distribution network for hydrogen for road vehicles.
Good.
Okay, then.
And then you've got to bear in mind that you need gas to make hydrogen.
Yeah. At the moment, yeah.
Yeah, at the moment.
Okay, moving on then to questions from the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet members. Firstly, Councillor Brewster, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, first of all, I would like to applaud the task force who have done obviously a really hard work at getting these put forward. I do have a question which I have very good reason to ask. Car parking review. Can I ask just how that will be carried out, what it's likely to bring forward? My one fear is that if we have town centres which don't have car parking which is attractive to those who want to go on them, that they will just shoot out of towns onto the out of town stores to do their shopping, and hence the town centres will miss out.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brewster. Would anyone, Cass, would you be able to provide a response on that regarding car parking?
Hello, yes, of course. So the car parking review, I think, has to go hand in hand with some of the visioning work that my colleague Fiona Duhamel is doing as well, because you're absolutely right, car parking affects everybody. It's about business, it's about users. What we need to do is ensure that we have alternate options for people to access town centres, so walking, cycling, absolutely, and a good public transport network. Then with the car parks that remain, what we need to make sure is that we have opportunity for turnover. So where people need to access for a short amount of time, they can do that, and that the car parks aren't all full with people staying all day. So it's a combination of making sure that the right spaces are available for the right people in the right places, but also importantly that those other options are developed to try and get the emissions down and the air quality up within our urban areas.
Thank you, Cass.
Okay.
Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chairman. No points of clarification at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flatman.
No, not at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming, do you have anything you want to say at this stage?
No, I would just say that I was going to add in response to Councillor Brewster's question but Cass has said it very well, better than I could. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
No questions at this point. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Morley.
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Richardson.
No questions from me. Thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Whitehead.
No questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Before I invite questions from the other Mid-Suffolk Council members, I understand that Councillor Lindsay has another question from Babergh. So, Councillor Lindsay, would you like to ask that now?
Thanks very much for letting me ask another question, Chair. Yeah, it was in a similar vein, though. CIFCO, the new business strategy is to increase investment in drive-through restaurants. How is that compatible with cutting carbon to zero by 2030? Thank you.
Chair, if I may, could I invite my colleague Emily Atack to provide a response?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Emily, would you like to?
Yes, that's fine. So the business plan is due for discussion at full council in July. The draft version was discussed at overview and scrutiny in June, so the papers will soon be submitted with the revised proposals in the next 10 days or so. The category that you're referring to was approximately 8 to 10% of the portfolio as a whole, and referred to food and beverage. So that includes restaurants, cafes, etc., of which a small proportion of that could have been drive-through operations. The board of SIFCO have reviewed their policy in this regard since overview and scrutiny, and are willing to remove the reference to drive-through properties in the forthcoming investment strategy. It was a very minor part of the strategy in any event, with the majority of investment focused on industrial and other assets rather than drive-through properties. So I hope that helps to answer that question.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
But also drive-throughs are a perfectly legitimate part of the market. They are in demand and people do like them. They're convenient. And at some point in the future, they'll be driving to them in electric or other vehicles anyway. So again, it concerns me that there's suggestions that we make these gestures without realizing that the full impact and the benefit that some of these businesses provide to our communities. Anyway, moving on to the Mid Suffolk members. I've got councillors. I'll take it in the order I've got in the list here in front of me. So Councillor Stringer, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I take it you can hear me. Is that okay?
Yes, you have a question.
I began the meeting, I have to say, quite optimistic, and I've now become quite depressed at what I've heard.
Do you have a question, Councillor Stringer?
Yes, I have. Yes. Okay. If you want, I'll just mute and I'll go away. I'm not going to be choked off like that. This is too important and not political. I would ask the officers who signed off on paragraph 12.4. It is very, very anti-change and very anti-science. It seems to be worrying about disruption. If it wasn't for disruption, we wouldn't be using ballpoint pens. We would still be using ink wells and quills. We really, and to suggest that a technology is emerging is renewable energy. Been using renewable energy for well over 1,000 years, battery storage over a century, and energy efficiency since we first crawled into caves. So actually, that use and saying it's an emerging technology means that we are suspicious of it and we somehow don't trust it. I've heard the term alternative energy. No such thing in science. There is either energy or there isn't. It's quite simple. There's no such thing as alternative. It either is in being or it isn't. So to use that kind of language is actually anti-science, and it is anti moving on to where we have agreed we need to be.
So what's the question, Councillor Stringer?
Can we amend 12.4, please?
No, I think your interpretation of it is a bit unfair, and it's not how I read that paragraph. Right, go. Moving on, Councillor Field. John?
So I was just having microphone switching on problems again. Yes, couple of points really. Obviously, having been on the working party, I'm pretty familiar with the document, so no detailed questions there. There did seem to be, to me, seeking some assurance that we do intend to crack on with things at a good pace. I mean, taking Councillor Whitehead's point that is not going to be achieved without money, and we may be somewhat short of that in the future, but this is desperately important. So are we going to get on with it at a good rate? The other sort of issue was really the decision process in Babergh that you discussed at some length. I'd like some assurance that that's really true for Mid Suffolk as well. And the final point isn't a question, I guess, but just the issue that on fossil fuel companies, we didn't use coal companies to develop oil. And there's no specific reason why we should use oil companies to develop hydrogen or wind power or whatever. No reason why we shouldn't if they're going in the right direction, but we don't have to link the two together quite that firmly. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming, do you wish to pick up on the questions that Councillor Field has raised?
Well, I think thank you. The comparison of coal to oil versus the major oil companies in the world to the development of renewables on a global scale, I don't think that is really a like-for-like comparison, Councillor Field. I'm sorry, I think coal is a very different thing. And I'm also very aware, having worked in the oil industry and still knowing a lot of people who work in it, that companies like Shell, BP, etc. are absolutely hell-bent on developing whatever energy source they can sell. And that is going to be low carbon energy in the future. So I think Councillor Malvisi has an extremely good point.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Fleming. What about Councillor Field's questions about the speed of implementation and also the actual process at Mid Suffolk for agreeing the spend on any individual proposal?
Well, I think I can assure you that at Mid Suffolk we are going to take what I hope are the approved proposals forward as soon as we can. I would add, and this may be more for debate, but there are a number of these proposals that will benefit and need collaboration with our colleagues at the other neighbouring authorities, because we can all work much better and more effectively together. But I know that all of us are see this as an extremely high priority, and even in these times when we're all short of money, I think this is the big change that we're seeing happen. Our priorities are changing, and with it the flow of our resources. So I'm very optimistic, and as cabinet member I don't intend to let this lag. I don't know whether Cass, you'd like to say anything.
Yes, of course. So in terms of timescale, I think the two main areas of impact being the leisure centre tariffs and the biofuel option, I would absolutely be looking to come back to Cabinet this financial year with fully scoped business cases on those, and with an implementation timeline of this financial year. Obviously, there are lots of other areas that we will start those business cases off straight away. So the team and I will be sitting down and looking at what resources we need to make sure that those happen. And of course, I'll go through the council's programme boards to help develop those. So yes, work will be happening on this plan immediately, and some has already started.
Pleased to hear that. What about the decision process? Will it be delegated or of the sort that was mentioned for Babergh?
So for Mid Suffolk, it has been delegated for the Cabinet member for Environment and the Cabinet member for Finance in consultation with the Section 151 officer to consider the business cases, but then that will they will look to approve the funding for each case. So the decision making is delegated to those Cabinet members and the Section 151 in consultation with the Section 151 officer.
Thank you.
Right, I'm going to go to Councillor Otten next, then Councillor Mansell, and then Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Chairman. Reading through the document, I'm interested in your paragraphs at 3.3, particularly about planning and the impact on the emerging local plan. The fact of the matter is that all of this has got to be embedded in any new local plan, and therefore I am concerned with the statement that says must not ensure this action does not cause delay to the current local plan timetable. What we don't want, surely, is for us to go through the whole process, have the local plan signed off, where we haven't actually embedded our views on how planning policy must be part of our climate change actions. And therefore, I really need to have it assured that somewhere that action will take place. And we also have got to be able, by having that embedded and written in the local plan, therefore be able to resist any, dare I say, resistance by any future developers. I think we'll all agree that the current developments going across mid-Suffolk at the moment have had to fall by the wayside, where certain environmental issues have not been able to be enforced.
Thank you, Councillor Otten. Obviously, I don't want this debate to move on to the joint local plan, but would either Councillor Byrne or perhaps Councillor Arthey be able to provide some assurance to Councillor Otten over her question?
I'll have a crack if you want. I won't go into great detail, but I have spoken to Tom Barker about this. Obviously, we don't want the emerging JLP to not be able to accommodate what we're trying to do here. And I think the simple answer is that none of what we're seeking to approve today is in conflict with the emerging JLP. So in other words, there may be some small policy tweaks that will help, and some of those have already been accommodated by the working group. And I don't believe that there's anything in what we might approve today that would be in conflict with the emerging plan. So in other words, it will accommodate all of this. I don't know if Tom, I mean, I have spoken. Well, sorry. I was just about to say I have spoken to Tom about this, and I think Tom's with us today, isn't he? So he may want to chip in as well.
I'd just like to come back, Councillor Arthey. I don't think tweaks is the appropriate phrase, if I may say so, because I really think it's got to be really highlighted and underlined and emphasised. We do not, as I say, want to end up with a local plan that we cannot therefore use as evidence.
Well, can I come back on that as well then? I mean, as I say, some of these policies have been tweaked, and I'm not trying to say that, that all we're doing is a tweak to something that was completely ineffective or likely to be ineffective before. If you have a look at policy LP23 in the preferred options document, that was already picking up a lot of the principles that are being picked up in this work. So it's not as if the local plan had nothing in it at all, and we've tweaked it to put a little bit in. What I'm saying is that some of the policies have been changed slightly by the working group to strengthen them. But the emerging JLP has already picked up a lot of climate change initiatives, particularly with regard to low carbon, sustainable construction, all of that sort of stuff.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne, do you have anything that you wish to add to that for Councillor Otten?
So, I'm sorry, Chair, I was just looking something up to help with that answer. I think running through the whole of the joint local plan, there is a basic premise that has at its heart the whole business of carbon reduction, we talk constantly of sustainability measures, etc., etc. The whole of the development industry is expected to contribute to that, and we do have a number of policies that address the issue directly. It is not necessary, I don't think, certainly not at this stage, to consider that only supplementary planning documents or a complete rejig of the local plan is what's required here. So for what reassurance that is, and I don't suppose it will be too greatly reassuring to my colleagues on the other side of the chamber, as it were. I'm a very ecologically minded conservative, if you like, and I am quite satisfied that the local plan does address these issues sufficiently and satisfactorily at this stage. And there's one thing I will say in addition to that, is that if it didn't, we would be in trouble, because I think we cannot afford any further delays to the preparation of the plan. We all know how vital it is to the future of our development in this district, and but I hope I can reassure you that we have considered these points and that they are well and truly embedded in it.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a question which I'd like to ask, and I may come back with another question and a supplementary if that's possible. My first question is about statement 3.2 in the decisions. In the determination of the business cases for each of the climate change proposals, how much weight, if any, will be given to the social dimension as opposed to a purely financial or environmental dimension?
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Who does anyone want to? Councillor Fleming, would you like to provide a response to that?
Well, I'll do my best. I think Councillor Mansell, you do make a very good point. We are, as a local authority, bound by the is it the Social and Environmental Quality Act? Correct me if I'm wrong, which requires councils to consider the social and economical effects of decision making. And I think we could probably, as part of our implementation of the carbon reduction plan, take a bit more note of what we're supposed to be doing here. Social and environmental issues go hand in hand. And I think that I agree. Let's make sure we include them in how we carry this out going forward.
Thank you. Certainly at Babergh, that the cabinet debate that will take place when deciding the financing will cover the social dimensions as well.
Yeah, but of course in Mid Suffolk we've allocated this £500,000 for this climate change proposals. And another question is if after you've determined those business cases.
Sorry, Councillor Mansell, I just need to quickly interrupt. Councillor Warboys, you're sharing your screen. Can you?
Yeah.
Can
we
stop that?
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I realise you didn't mean to. No,
I've just spotted how to stop it. Right.
Okay.
Sorry.
Councillor Mansell.
Can I come back? That if once you've determined those business cases, it turns out that the 500,000 is insufficient, and the proposals are still deemed to be worthy because of their environmental and social well-being benefits. Have we got any option to go back to full council to authorise further funding, either within this financial year or beyond, for any of the climate change measures that are in the proposals?
Would anyone from the Mid Suffolk Cabinet like to pick up on that? Councillor Fleming, Councillor Whitehead, or Councillor Morley?
Councillor Whitehead.
Councillor Whitehead.
Okay, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if there is a strong business case for further money, then we'd go back to full council for the money. I mean, it's not a bottomless pit, but I always said £500,000 is a starter.
Thank you for that reassurance, Councillor Whitehead. I mean, I personally, I think that climate change is important, and maybe £500,000 isn't enough. We've set ourselves a very high target of going carbon neutral by 2030. Although I think Councillor Malvisi may have actually misread and said 2020, which might be a bit of a tall order. But even if we do it by 2030, it's going to cost. It's likely to cost us money, and we have to be prepared to spend that money. So thank you, and also thank you to Councillor Fleming for her reassurance that the social dimension will be taken into consideration alongside the other issues when you come to determine the business case. Thank you very much.
Can I just add something? I just want to say that our trajectory that we're starting on isn't going to suddenly. It's not a one-time event. This is something that's continuous for the future. So I would actually be bold enough to say that, of course, £500,000 isn't the end of it. This is something that will be going on into the future. After I'm retired and under the sod, I hope. So yeah, it's certainly isn't all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. You really are looking a long way into the future then.
Well, thank you very much for your compliment.
Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask what's happened to Councillor Rachel Eburn's question? She submitted a question to Emily Ewell, and I was anticipating that would be asked. Is somebody going to ask that question, or shall I?
I think it was submitted after the deadline, and that we were probably expecting Councillor Eburn to ask it in person. But if you would like to ask it on her behalf, that's you're quite welcome to do that.
Thank you, Chair. I've got her question and I've got my own question. I'm going to ask my own question first because it does follow on to a degree from what Councillor Mansell was saying. Councillor Fleming rightly said that Mid-Suffolk will need to work with other authorities. Mid-Suffolk have committed £500,000 to spend this year. So my concern is, and I wonder if you've discussed this with Babergh District Council, whether or not they will be able to commit the same sort of level of funds for joint projects. And also, concerned that there appear to be different arrangements in terms of authorisation to spend. I wonder if Councillor Fleming could respond to that, please.
I'm not sure that it's really for me to respond to that.
No, I mean, Councillor Fleming can't really speak on behalf of Babergh.
No.
Perhaps as the Cabinet Member for Finance at Babergh, I can say that we did not allocate the £500,000 along the lines that Mid-Suffolk did, simply because we did not have that money to spare from our transformation fund. But we will be looking at each individual project, each individual initiative, and the Cabinet will determine and debate the funding for that, or the Council will. I can't make any promises or guarantees at this stage, Councillor Wellham. It will very much depend on the projects as they come forward, the costs, and what money we have available at Babergh at the time. So we'll obviously do our best to match and to work in step with Mid-Suffolk. Obviously, we're working in partnership, and this is very much a joint venture for both of us. And so we will do our best, but I can't make any particular promises at this stage.
Well, I'm grateful for that, but my concern is that Mid-Suffolk might identify projects which would be more beneficial if they were joint projects, but would we still be prepared to go ahead with projects even if Babergh could not match fund?
Would anyone from Mid-Suffolk like to respond?
Can I respond to that?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Fleming. Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying, Councillor Wellham, and I think what we're seeing here is obviously the sort of some of the fundamental differences between the two councils and how they operate and fund their work. but I see going forward that these differences are going to become less. And I think if projects are important, I am confident that Babergh Council will find the money to work with us and that there won't be a disjoint. If there is, then I think we'll address it when it comes up. But I think it's a problem that hasn't happened yet. Does anyone want to add anything?
Perhaps I can add something as well.
Yeah.
Because
Morley, yes.
Mid Suffolk, we don't only work with Babergh. Obviously, we work most closely with Babergh, but some of our initiatives are across the whole of the county. And although our Babergh colleagues may decide that they don't want to follow an initiative, or in terms of timing, follow our timescales, that does not preclude us not working with anybody else. East Suffolk, West Suffolk, Ipswich County. We will work with anyone that will help us deliver to our targets.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I actually understood that from Councillor Fleming's presentation and an answer to a previous question. Shall I go on to Councillor Rachel Eburn's question?
Yes, please.
Which is, why isn't the Cabinet showing political leadership by taking the opportunity to convene a citizens' assembly or similar to address climate change across the district, engaging all residents, businesses and organisations, as many other councils of all political persuasions across the country have done?
I think, shall I take that one, John?
Well, to be honest, Councillor Morley, I would like to save that for our debate later, because I think there's something that the cabinet, the two cabinets together, probably need to discuss. It's more than just a quick answer to that question. I don't know how you feel about that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I think that would be the best way forward. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Yes, I have got a question, but I don't really like being pedantic, but there's a couple of points I must sort of clarify first of all. I did enjoy Councillor Malvise's opening comments, and I felt the spirit of them was really very well intended, but I must correct her that you don't need gas to produce hydrogen. Hydrogen is also produced by electrolysis, and at the moment there's a crossover point, and now more gas is produced by electrolysis than it is from methane or other hydrocarbons. In terms of emerging technologies, London Transport already runs a fleet of double-decker buses built in Belfast, powered by hydrogen, produced by wind farms in the Thames estuary.
Yay for them.
Yes, the technology is there. Admittedly, the network is limited, but it exists. And looking at countries across Europe, it is a growing and incredibly important part of the economy. But my main question was for you, Councillor Ward. It was about the Treasury management strategy. From your remarks, it seemed to me clear that you were looking for the best value for investments. I had taken sort of advice from a previous briefing from our officers, and it was quite clear that to our investment strategies, there should be an ethical and community dimension. It's not just getting the best value for money. I think my point being is that the best way to get the oil industry to invest in non-oil energy sources is to divest investments from them. So my question is he absolutely sure that we really are taking a proper ethical and community values into account with our Treasury management strategy?
Thank you, Councillor Warboys. I didn't say to get the best value. I was quite clear that our strategy is security first, followed by liquidity, followed by yield. So yield or value or income or whatever is the third of those criteria. In terms of, I think we'll probably agree to disagree on the fossil fuel companies. I don't think by divesting our investments from them is the way forward. We should be encouraging them to move in the direction of being energy companies. The last thing that we need to do is to harm their financial capability to do that. But I guess that's going to be a philosophical or a political difference that we have. Your original comment about, I take your point about hydrogen. Yes, it is increasingly being produced from electrolysis of seawater using electrical energy from wind turbines, and that for me is excellent. It's got to be the way forward, and I see increasingly that hydrogen from that source will become the primary fuel for vehicles. I think it has a more viable future than battery technology, quite honestly, and it doesn't have the drawbacks of battery technology in terms of the resources that batteries require, and the questionable means by which those resources are obtained from countries abroad. So that's one thing that I think we can all agree on with regard to hydrogen. So I've got Councillor Warboys. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
Well, yes, I think I could go on from that to the interim strategy of using biofuels. I think it would be, is there a limit on that for the sort of lifetime of the existing diesel engines? And when it comes to the point at which those engines are replaced, would they be replaced by something other than diesel or biofuel based? I don't regard biofuel as a sustainable energy source.
It's an I'll ask perhaps Councillor Fleming or Cass to come in on that. I know we renew our fleet every 7 years, so the next renewal is about 2023. Whether that's a feasible time for moving off biofuels onto something else, I don't know. Councillor Fleming.
Can I? Yes, I actually, Councillor Warboys, absolutely agree with you on both the issue of batteries and hydrogen and biofuels. I think one of the things that I think we discussed at the task force in our renewable or low carbon energy supply was that we try to avoid biofuels generated from things like wood pellets that the Drax plant is producing, because they're so damaging and unsustainable. We wanted to try to exclude those. So absolutely right there. There is obviously a limited amount of waste vegetable oil going to be available unless we all start eating a lot of McDonald's chip products. I suppose we could do that in the interests of the environment. But, you know, these are all obviously issues that we need to contend with. We're in fairly new territory.
Okay.
I'll hand over to someone else who can make more sense of the question. Would anyone else like to comment?
Sure.
I don't think so.
Cass? Have I responded?
Cass?
Yeah, sure. So possibly just on the renewing of the fleet section of your question there, Councillor Warboys. So
yes.
As and when our fleet is up for renewal, we will absolutely be looking at what all of the options are available to us. And clearly, we want to move away from our diesel fleet as quickly as possible. At this point in time, electric is being developed by people like Dennis Eagle and some other manufacturers, but it is in very early days, and most of them are just trials at the moment. But absolutely, clearly, that is going to that technology is going to improve and become more available to us. So each time that we have vehicles that we need to renew, Councillor Ward was absolutely right. 2023 is the next year that most of our fleet is up for renewal. It's possibly unlikely, I'd say, that the refuse vehicles are going to be fully available by that point. However, we absolutely are keeping a really close eye on what technology is developing and when. So as soon as those opportunities come up, we can take them. A number of councils take the opportunity to renew their fleet to new technologies on a phased basis. So, for instance, at the moment, the technology around refuse vehicles is more than double the cost of a diesel vehicle at the moment. So clearly a lot of councils can't even afford to move over to a full fleet renewal. So they're taking it piece by piece. So it's quite common to have different technologies running on routes within the waste service. So we will absolutely take the opportunity to look every time our fleet is up for renewal.
Thanks, Cass.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you.
Right. I do want to move on quite soon. We've had quite a lot of questions, but I've got two more then. Councillor McCraw from Babergh has been waiting there for quite some time, so I'll go back to him before finally asking. The hands keep changing here. Councillor McCraw.
I'm trying to get my screen up. Hang on.
Can see you.
You can see me. That's wonderful. I think we've got a delay again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My screen doesn't show that. It's just a couple of points of clarification. In the interim, I've pulled out the joint local plan and I've checked a couple of things because I've taken questions on this from a resident or two on the subject of building regulations. And what I was able to say regarding building regulations is that those are being dealt with in a government re-examination of the entire scope of building regulations. And much as we are required to comply and be not subservient, but certainly in compliance with the National Planning Policy Framework, so would we be with building regulations. But our policies, LP23 and LP25, specifically deal with sustainable construction and design for LP23 and energy sources, storage and distribution in LP25. And I can see no conflict, as Councillor Arthur has suggested, in those. But some of this stuff, let's be frank about this, is not within our gift. What I think the Cabinet are debating today is what is within our gift, what could be in the future. And I think the point's been made. This is a starting point. We've got a baby in the bathwater. We want it to be a bigger baby, maybe. We'd like it to do more. But it's doing something that we weren't doing before, and it's making steps. Maybe they're baby steps, and maybe the baby could be bigger. But it is the baby we've got, and I don't think we should just chuck that out because we don't like this detail or that detail. I have no objections to some of the points being made, and I do believe they can be revisited. But I have to say, to a certain extent, we've given a job to a climate change task force to report on this. This is what they've reported. The people, we have to give them the responsibility to have done that, and to start rejecting or not accepting every single part of their conclusions seems to be a little bit circular. I don't think it's good governance from that point of view, and I can't see that this is helping the council move forward on this. And the whole point is to move forward.
Yeah.
The detail can be sorted later.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. I have Councillor Pratt, and I think that will be the last of the two I had listed.
Yeah, thank you. I did have my hand up, but I put it down after you read my name out on your list. I know that this has already been covered, but I will make my point and ask a question nonetheless on section 9.3, culture, change and governance. I'm a little bit dismayed by some of the dialogue earlier on about, in defence of the fossil fuel industry. It does make it sound like the council is slightly apologetic for fossil fuels. My concern and my question is, if you continue to invest in fossil fuel interests, how do you know that they're not going to use that money in order for exploration, extraction and the production of fossil fuel products rather than clean energy that we would like to see them, or personally preferably other companies? I don't. And secondly, I agree with Councillor Field and Councillor Warboys on the fact that it doesn't need to be fossil fuel companies that are driving change to cleaner energy. There are plenty of other companies. Indeed, the government public money has been used to fund big projects in the past, like rail, roads, power stations, communications. You name it. It's these big tickets have been done mainly on the public spending in previous times. And then I wanted to ask another question regarding 2.7. Councillor Mellon suggested that all new build councils should build to zero carbon standards. Okay, we're not even then suggesting that all new homes and all new developments are zero carbon at this stage. We're just starting with council homes. I want to know why that's not possible. Thank you.
Sorry, you said 2.7?
Yeah, 2.7.
Where are you looking at?
9.4.
So
we don't have a 2.7.
I was looking at Appendix G.
Oh no, you need to look at Appendix A. That's the one that's part of this paper.
In any case, yeah, my questions still stand regarding culture change and governance. You know, regarding divesting from fossil fuels. How do you know that money will not be spent on extraction, exploration and production of more dirty energy? And then my second question was, why can't we build all new council homes to zero carbon standard?
On your first point, quite clearly, the market and legislation in countries around the world is moving to a zero carbon basis, and so those companies are going to have to move with that and use their resources to help facilitate that. I see no reason why we should rely on public financing when they're perfectly good private companies with the resources to be able to do this instead. Why use taxpayers' money when there's perfectly available private funding for that? But in terms of your housing and moving on to all new zero housing, Councillor Fleming, would you like to pick up on that one or pass on to somebody else?
Thank you. I think I'll probably pass on to someone else because I think we're not quite at the point of providing totally zero carbon housing, but it's obviously where we want to go.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, would you like me to take that?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Councillor Fleming, yeah. Okay, Councillor Flatman.
Okay, so we are currently working with consultants to develop a new design guide and technical specification for our affordable housing developments. This will set positive and ambitious goals for delivering efficient and resilient developments made to last and contribute to our goal to be carbon neutral.
Thank you, Councillor Flatman. Right, I'll take one more question then, and that's the final one from Councillor Stringer. Councillor Stringer is leaving the meeting. Right. Okay. Well, moving on then. We've now finished the questions, and I will open this item up now for debate from the cabinet members. And before I go and ask each cabinet member in turn if they have anything to contribute to the debate, I think we should probably first of all pick up on Councillor Eburn's question. And to remind everyone, the question is, why isn't the Cabinet showing political leadership by taking the opportunity to convene a citizens' assembly or similar to address climate change across the district, engaging all residents, businesses and organisations, as many other councils of all political persuasions across the country have done? I will go over to the Councillor Morley, I think, first of all, but I will say from my point of view, I just disagree with the initial premise that we're not showing political leadership. I believe that by handing over responsibility for this, we would be abrogating political leadership. And I have personally very strong objections to citizens' assemblies. For me, they're the antithesis of democracy. They tend to be stacked by activists, those that shout the loudest, and the majority don't really get a proper representation that way, whereas they do through the ballot box by voting for us. So that's my personal view on citizens' assemblies. But Councillor Morley, would you like to say anything about this?
Yes, I think I will. Thank you very much. Yes, I agree. We as district councillors are democratically elected to make decisions for our patch. And as Councillor Ward says, if we abdicate that responsibility to an unelected group of people, however well intentioned, then that is just that. It's an abdication of responsibility. We are the democratically elected people to go along with that. Now, I do recognise that sometimes we don't engage enough with our residents, and we do need to get better at that, which is why that within our corporate outputs, we already have an item which is improved democratic engagement with our residents, and that will be coming through. It has been delayed somewhat because of COVID-19 and everything else, but the fact that all of our meetings now are live streamed, everything is done in public, we are moving towards that, and there will be something coming forward towards the end of the year.
Thank you. Councillor Malvisi, you have your hand raised. Did you want to comment on this particular? Yeah,
I do. The Greeks who gave us democracy used to meet in the agora, and we only have to look at how that democratic country functions. Citizens' assemblies, like you've both said, but both chairs have said, are not elected bodies. We are, and therefore we have a responsibility. And being elected, we are accountable. And citizens' assemblies are not accountable to anyone by definition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does any other member of either of the two cabinets wish to comment on this? Because I think the general consensus is that citizens' assemblies are not for us. We are democratic districts.
Can I say something?
Councillor Fleming, yes, of course.
Yes. I think, I mean, I agree. I don't think we need to set up a formal citizen assembly per se. However, I do think that there is a real place here for involving people in shaping the climate change agenda. And I think part of the work going forward, so to speak, will be in involving communities, parishes, and people more in how we do this. I think all of us as representatives need to reach out and actively try to get our residents to interact with us on this topic. I mean, I have tried in my own wards at parish council meetings, you know, talking about climate change, environment, saying, please do contact me with your ideas, etc., etc. I have to admit, I haven't had a lot of response. So not as much as I'd hoped. So I wouldn't wash this out as something we can do better, because I think it probably is. I think there may be a place for having, you know, some joint parish meetings to discuss actions as they actually take shape and affect people to get some interaction going there. So that would be my view on it.
Thank you, Councillor. That does make sense. Right. OK. I think we've probably discussed this issue enough, but I will now go through each member of the two cabinets for any further comments that anyone wishes to make. So firstly, Councillor Arthey, do you have anything else you wish to contribute to this?
Yeah, just a few things probably. I think the good thing is that most of the questions and comments that we've heard were not particularly negative in principle, which is good. And I think that shows how hard we worked in the group to try and include views from across both councils. There is one little thing that's cropped up in the questions twice, I think, that I wanted to comment on. I think it was first of all brought up by John Field and then by Daniel Pratt later on. And it's about fossil fuel companies. And I think you said, John, yourself, that they're energy companies these days. And I just wanted to say something about that, because I think you can say we shouldn't be relying. I think that was the word that John Field used. We shouldn't be relying on them to develop alternatives. But by the same token, we shouldn't be discounting them, because they are involved in a lot of research into energy production, not from fossil fuels, renewable energy. And whether they got their resources from developing fossil fuels in the past or not, you can't deny that they do have considerable resources that a lot of the smaller startup companies don't have. So we shouldn't be discounting the contribution that they can make to alternatives. And the last thing I was going to say is that we're not deciding on everything for the next 10 years today. This is not a decision today, and nothing else is going to be done for the next 10 years, and what we say today is fixed. This is going to be subject to review as we progress. So I think it's an excellent starting point. I'm sure there will be more things that we want to do. There may be some things that we can't do for whatever reason, and all of this will be subject to review as we go along. So I'm quite pleased with the way that it's gone today.
Thank you. Councillor Busby.
Yeah, just a couple of points. 12.4, the point that Andrew Stringer brought up early on, which was referring to emerging technologies. I'm not certain that I agree with him. They're not emerging. I think they're now fully fledged, and I think we should take that word out or replace it with something like key technologies or expanding technologies. It's a bit more, they're a bit further along the lines than emerging. And I think the other points that we need to consider for that response about where we invest our pension funds, we're talking about what impact we can do to make ourselves carbon neutral. I don't think that'll help. Whatever we do with our investments is not going to actually impact on what we do.
Okay, thank you. In terms of an alternative word, well, we could just replace the word emerging with low carbon, I guess, or carbon reduction technologies.
Yeah.
Carbon reduction?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Jess?
Merging out or whatever. Yeah.
Carbon reduction technologies.
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, let's do that then.
Yes, so I'm fine with either that or low carbon.
Well, it's talking about energy efficiency, which isn't necessarily a low carbon. So carbon reduction, I think.
Carbon reduction's fine with me.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Can I just say I'm not sure about that, because LPG is lower carbon, but that doesn't mean it's a solution.
No. So what word would you like to use there, Councillor Arthey?
I'm not sure, but if we're talking
Embryonic?
if we're talking if we're talking about the wording in paragraph 12.4, instead of emerging, I think this is what Dave Busby was getting at. Should it be something like developing technologies? Because that also picks up on Andrew Stringer's point earlier on that we shouldn't call them alternative because some of them have been about for centuries. So should it be developing technologies? I mean, I don't know really, but I'm just making the point that we shouldn't be committing ourselves to lower carbon. Because, okay.
Developing, Councillor Stringer has just suggested evolving in the chat pane, but I'm happy with developing.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes. Sorry. Who?
It was Arthur.
I was Arthur. Sorry. Hi, Arthur. Sorry.
I was too polite.
Too much going on my screen here.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I'm conscious you're looking at section 12 or paragraph 12.4 and discussing possible changes. The monitoring officer may wish to contradict me, but my view would be the report is the report.
Yeah.
You of course can make changes and amend the recommendations, but the wording in the report is as you have received it. You've given commentary and you are currently collectively discussing what you think that should or shouldn't look like. I think that's fine, and the minutes would record that. I don't think you need to come up with an alternative form of words for the report that's already been published and placed before you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Davis. Do you have anything you wish to contribute at this stage? Councillor Davis. I'll come back. Councillor Malvisi, anything else you wish to say at this point?
No.
Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to agree with Councillor Arthey, this is not in stone. This is an evolving action plan and will change as we move forward. You know, especially I'm thinking specifically with housing. You know, there'll be new technology, new construction methods coming forward, and when those changes will be picked up on, and the action plan will be changed accordingly. So I think as it stands, it's an excellent plan. And as I said previously in my introduction, you know, I think it's brilliant. It's a really big step forward, and I look forward to this being delivered in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
No, Chair, no other points to raise. I was going to make a point, but Arthur said exactly as my thoughts already were, that we didn't need to get stuck on particular wordings, but no other comments at this stage, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. And all I'd like to say at this stage is to reiterate what's been said by Councillor Arthey, Councillor Osborne. It is an excellent plan. The cross-party working group has certainly done an excellent job and come up with something which is entirely deliverable as a starter. It will evolve as our aspirations change and as our ability to do things and not least to finance things changes. But at this point, I think it's realistic and a very good example of what we can do collectively. Moving on to the Mid-Suffolk members now. Councillor Brewster, do you have anything you wish to contribute?
No, I don't really, Mr. Chairman. I just feel that, you know, to get on with this and progress it will be excellent.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. In the previous administration, I was the environment portfolio holder, and I knew this was likely to be one of the key issues of the next administration, and I was wondering at that time, you know, quite how, if I carried on with that job, I would have approached it. And to me, it was a pretty daunting prospect. Fortunately, should I say fortunately, I'm not sure. It wasn't my job after all. I was moved into a different portfolio, and I have to say that I think that my successor here and the team behind her and Liz on the Babergh side have done a superb job of setting this out and giving us an amazing foundation on which to start to build now and deliver what we know we can deliver. So I'm just looking forward to seeing it develop, seeing it open up, seeing it start to deliver its promises, as I'm sure it will. So I don't have anything to add to a debate that's likely to change that view.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Flatman.
Really, to reiterate what Councillor Byrne has just said and others gone before, let's just get on with it.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Fleming, do you have anything more you wish to contribute?
I'll just have a quick word. I think Andrew Stringer has made a point in the chat that probably the word we need is in 12.4 is evolving, and I think let's take that on board in our thinking. We can't change the report, but thank you, Andrew, for that. And this is all dynamic. I think we're used to things being set in stone and being sort of written in concrete, and they aren't. We're dealing with a dynamic plan, and our local plan, believe it or not, is dynamic as well. As soon as it's approved, we'll be working on the next iteration. So, change is what life's about these days, and we've got to get used to dealing with uncertainty and being comfortable with it. And with that in mind, I'd just like to thank everyone who worked on the task force. I hope the task force can carry on the work and do things at a different level once we've got this going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Chair. Start by saying I don't, shall I say, entirely disagree with your observations about citizens' assemblies. I think it is a matter for local authorities to take the lead in these matters, and I think the approach that has been taken, which is to constitute the task force across parties, across the councils, is absolutely the right way to go. And I think often in these discussions, what happens is that we end up spending our time talking about points of difference, maybe where we don't see things entirely the same way. The trouble with that is that we lose sight of the vast majority of issues and proposals on which there is such wide agreement. The acid test now is about delivery, because having the ideas and proposals is one thing, delivering them is another. I'm delighted that from the Mid-Suffolk end that we've been able to make that provision, subject to all of the requirements about business cases being prepared. And we know, don't we, that £500,000, though it's far from insignificant, won't ultimately be enough to do all that we need to do. But I would like to applaud and commend all of those that have been involved in the task force work and the action plan that has resulted, which I think is excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really excited about this. The task force has worked incredibly hard, and it's always really difficult to coalesce so many different views into one strategic document. And I think the task force and our officers have done a fantastic job on this. I'm really looking forward, and I'm really excited about delivering the items that fall within my portfolio. I'm really looking forward to working with my officers on this. To be honest, I think they've already started because we have no intention of waiting. So things are already underway, and I'm really excited about the papers that are going to be coming before us in the not too distant future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I similarly also welcome what I think is a significant undertaking by both councils. I think it's very clear through the report and the range of recommendations that we've been asked to consider in Appendix F that an enormous amount of work has gone into this. And so I think we should, in the first instance, thank the Climate Change Task Force and CAS and the Environment Team as well for their contributions in producing this report. In my view, these proposals represent an enormous step change in the way that we work. I don't believe we should understate the challenges that we will face in implementing this, but I do believe that these measures will be immensely important to the environment and are also, as Councillor Gould alluded to, they are, I think, robust, well thought through, and hopefully will ultimately be deliverable. And I personally I know this is obviously the beginning of a very long process, but I believe this report will make a real difference in reducing our carbon emissions of both districts. And I am actually especially proud of the fact that we will be aiming to achieve net zero 20 years ahead of the UK government itself. And so for those reasons, I will be supporting the recommendations in this report and hope that both cabinets will endorse it as well.
Thank you very much. Finally, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. I think there's exciting times ahead. I think there's a lot of emerging technology that is still to emerge. Whilst I was listening to the debate, I was also Googling and found an investment company. It says our purpose is to reimagining energy for people on our planet. We want to help the world reach net zero and improve people's lives. I think whilst there's companies like that out there, this was called Beyond Petroleum or BP. I think there's, that the future is bright.
Yeah, thank you very much. Right. Well, I think we're coming to the end. Before we move to the vote, I just want Councillor Malvisi, you and I proposed and seconded this, but I would like to ask you if you're prepared to accept an amendment to 3.3 to add words and or HRA at the end of the paragraph. So it'll read agree funding from the general fund and or HRA.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So that will
I
be
don't
the
have a problem with that.
Sorry, no. That's the amended recommendation for Babergh. So now can we move to the vote, please? Claire, would you like to conduct that for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So when I call your name, if you could answer for, against, or abstain. Councillor Arfi.
For.
Councillor Busby.
Big for.
Councillor Davis.
Councillor Davis has had to leave the meeting. He's had another engagement.
Okay. Councillor Malvisi.
For.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Ward.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
And for Mid Suffolk.
Councillor Brewster.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Flatman. For. Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Gould.
For.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Richardson.
For.
And Councillor Whitehead.
For.
Thank you, Chair. Again, that is unanimous.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Well, that brings this meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone. The agenda does say that the next meeting is in August, but the likelihood is that the August meeting, certainly for Babergh, is going to be postponed or cancelled rather, and the agenda items picked up in September. I believe, Councillor Morley, that'll be the same for Mid Suffolk.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And can we terminate the live feed now, please?
Thank you.